inside the walls. When you try to run from them, that's when the real fun begins.
What? Leave me alone! Please just go!
We are talking the movie simply called Dolls. This one is not a remake of the 1987 movie of the same name, although they do share some similarities. This one is directed by Cuyle Carvin and it's a 2019 release. And it actually stars Dee Wallace, who is the most recognisable name here. You'll know her from, obviously, E.T., The Howling, along with a whole host of genre favourites. So what is the story with Dolls 2019? So we have this guy, this middle-aged guy. He is a kind of children's book writer, and he kind of moves back into his mother's old house because his mother's passed away. He's separated from his wife through some reasons you'll kind of learn through the movie. And he's not long there when his kind of teenage daughter turns up after him, and she's kind of had a falling out with her mum. So the pair of them, who are, one is, the father is now sort of struggling, sort of recovering alcoholic. The daughter is on some type of medication. So they both have some kind of issues, some baggage. Now there's these three creepy looking dolls in the attic, and the father is just kind of writing this book called The Attic Dolls. He's kind of thinks he's taking inspiration from these particular kind of creepy dolls. However, these dolls may have sinister intent and may actually be hosts to demons and spirits. And as the movie progresses, we'll kind of learn more about their kind of the past and kind of obviously what kind of what's actually behind them, so to speak. With a few more characters kind of turn up. Dee Wallace is a kind of a neighbour who also has a connection to these dolls. So what do we think about Dolls 2019? What works, first of all? The first thing for me, and this is going to be a surprising one, for the strongest element of this movie for me is the character work. But that's a big thing for me because I like believable characters. I like well written and well acted characters that seem like real people. And for the most part, this movie delivered. So let's talk about our three main characters: the father, the daughter, and then kind of to a certain degree the mother, who is not in the whole much. She just kind of comes and goes because they're estranged. But the daughter is I suppose our kind of point of view character here. She's kind of like this young 17-year-old girl, and she is angry with her mother because she cheated on the father, etc. But I really liked the character dynamic. I liked the fact that she is a 17-year-old girl who's rebellious, but not altogether kind of disrespectful of her parents. She's a little bit to her mum in scenes. But there are scenes here that I feel are incredibly well done, where we have a real family dynamic. Don't worry, we'll get onto the horror stuff, but I want to talk about the characters first, because to me, this was one of the most important things that drew me in as a viewer, because I was interested and invested in these characters. I liked the father-daughter relationship, I liked the kind of the mother-daughter relationship, and I liked the parents' relationship with each other as well, because they clearly all had issues with each other, but they clearly all still weren't too far gone, and kind of still were somewhat respectful. And I thought the acting, particularly from the female cast here, the daughter and the mother, was very good, very convincing. That you were brought into these characters. The father, he wasn't quite as strong, if I'm honest, but I still appreciated the lines and the kind of some of the scenes here with him were good. I liked his dad jokes and stuff like that, and I thought the way he was with his daughter, for example, was very authentic. The same with with the wife. I mean, they've split up, but she's still, he just doesn't want the daughter kind of talking trash about, her mum, etc. Things like this. I thought all did a good job. And then we kind of talk about our kind of secondary characters. Primarily there's kind of like this young lad who turns up, who is a kind of, this gardener who, of course the teenage girl has a bit of a crush on. And I still liked his character because he's played to be, this kind of cocky chap. He's also somewhat respectful to the father to a degree. And it's kind of like, it's a cliche for him to be this cocky kind of dude who's only thinking about sex. And I like the fact that he's, you know, he's kind of like, he's obviously attracted to the daughter, but he still kind of like has a kind of element of respect and kind of following the rules. So I quite like that. So I thought the character work here was surprisingly good. Dee Wallace, more or less just kind of plays your straight, you know, crazy old lady type. I didn't, you know, she does this kind of thing in her sleep, to be honest with you. Her character wasn't quite as well rounded, but I don't think it was kind of, she didn't really have much more to do, to be fair. So that was the first thing. The character work was good. The mythology of this film as well, I thought, was quite good, and they have this kind of this dad's writing this kind of story that sort of like foreshadow what's going to happen, and it's kind of hinted at that these dolls are influencing him in kind of certain scenes. So we kind of hinted at a kind of somewhat of a twist and things like that. So I thought the world building was kind of quite good here. The dolls themselves look kind of reasonably creepy. There's some quite funny scenes, well, not funny, but quite sort of spooky scenes and a few jump scares where the dolls will suddenly just kind of like, you know, the camera will pan away and come back, and there'll be a kind of a doll stood there and things like this. Limited budget, so we don't have like Chucky levels of kind of like special effects here. Again, we'll come on to that, but some of the dolls are used in an effective manner to kind of create some quite creepy moments. I feel the bigger one looks a little bit kind of like it's made for this film. Rather, the two other ones, the two smaller ones, look like actual dolls that you would potentially buy, but just a little bit kind of creepy looking. The big one doesn't really look like that. It just looks like something's made out of paper mache for a prop. I will say that. Which leads me on to any kind of negatives. The horror stuff for me was maybe the weaker part, although it's not necessarily bad. The dolls themselves, due to budget restraints, are used sparingly in regards to any special effects. So there's a kind of a little bit of CGI making the kind of the faces kind of move and stuff like that, but we don't really see any type of kind of animation. It's just, sometimes you'll see things move, but it's literally just someone off screen moving the doll and things like that. There's not really any kind of budgetary kind of like special effects here, outside of a couple of visual effects, just kind of making like it smile and things like this. But the doll effects, there's one scene where you will see the dolls kind of walking, and that wasn't particularly well done. So the doll effects are a little bit kind of underwhelming, but it's a low budget film, so it's kind of, it depends what you're expecting to a certain degree. If you compare it to the 1987 movie called Dolls, that to me had a better use of kind of lower budget kind of special effects to kind of animate these sort of things. So I don't think it's the horror elements are quite as good here. They try and get away with it by having a lot of like audio effects, so you'll hear them kind of running around upstairs and stuff like that. And in the mythology it says when you look at them they don't move, a little bit like Toy Story actually. And that's a kind of like cheap way of really not having to kind of do any kind of special effects. To me, the movie had quite a lot of kind of unanswered questions to a certain degree and plot holes. It's kind of for example, one scene that we're kind of led to believe that the father is kind of drawing this stuff because he's kind of possessed, but then we see him looking at looking at his pages that are drawn that clearly he hasn't drawn. So it's kind of like, oh, well, the doll's drawing them now. So there are some things that it kind of it plays a little bit fast and loose with some of the mythology sometimes, and I've got to say the ending, the very end of the kind of the epilogue was just a little bit weak, and I feel kind of went in a fairly predictable manner. The only other thing I would say that it goes against what I was saying in regards to the character work, there are some kind of writing here that I wasn't buying for the character work. And without giving away spoilers, the first death in the film, when it's kind of discovered by the characters that are alive, I'm not saying who's dead and who's alive, to me the reactions weren't particularly genuine. They just seem to get over it very quickly. So this movie does have a little bit of cheap writing, although I feel the character work for the most part is very strong. But overall, this is an enjoyable B-movie. I felt we could have done with a little bit more budget, just a little bit more kind of like scale perhaps. But I actually thought it wasn't a bad film, to be fair. I actually quite enjoyed this one, so I'll give it an above average 6 out of 10. Yeah, an enjoyable kind of B-movie horror film. Not as good as the 1987 Dolls, which I really, really like, but certainly a lot better than a lot of these kind of more modern kind of B-movie doll films, like, you know, Robert the Doll. There was like the Elf film and stuff like this. It's miles better than them. 6 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.